In many neighborhoods across the country, homeowners associations, HOAs, serve as guardians of community standards, tasked with maintaining property values and fostering a sense of uniformity. These organizations often establish rules regarding everything from lawn care to home renovations, ensuring that all residents adhere to a shared vision of aesthetic harmony. While many homeowners appreciate the structure and stability that HOAs provide, conflicts can arise when individuals feel these regulations are overly restrictive or unfairly enforced. Common issues within HOA governance include disputes over architectural changes, landscaping choices, and even holiday decorations. As communities evolve and personal expression becomes more prominent, tensions can escalate between residents who wish to showcase their individuality and boards that prioritize conformity. Such was the case in my neighborhood when I found myself facing an unexpected challenge, a fine for what the HOA deemed illegal decorations. Little did they know that behind my festive display lay a legal mind seasoned in navigating complex regulations. This conflict was about more than just ornaments. It represented a clash of authority, personal rights, and the very essence of community living. As I prepared to confront this situation, I realized it would not only test my resolve but also redefine my relationship with the neighborhood I called home. Nestled at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, my home was a blend of traditional charm and personal flair. The white picket fence surrounded a vibrant garden, bursting with colorful blooms that changed with the seasons. Each year, I took pride in decorating my front yard for holidays, transforming it into a delightful spectacle that reflected both my personality and love for festive cheer. This year was no exception. I had adorned my porch with whimsical decorations, including twinkling lights, cheerful gnomes, and oversized pumpkins that greeted passers-by. However, what I viewed as an expression of creativity caught the attention of the HOA board. In their eyes, my dazzling display strayed too far from the neighborhood's approved aesthetic. Within days, I received a formal notice outlining a hefty fine for what they deemed illegal decorations, citing vague bylaws that left little room for interpretation. The initial shock quickly turned to indignation as I read their stern warnings about compliance and potential consequences. Feeling the weight of their authority weigh heavily upon me, I prepared to defend not just my decorations but also my right to express myself within the confines of our community, a right I believed should be celebrated rather than stifled. A few days after putting up my decorations, I returned home to find a crisp, formal notice affixed to my front door. My heart sank as I read the words printed neatly on the official HOA letterhead. The document began with the usual pleasantries, but quickly shifted to a stern warning about my holiday display. It described my decorations as excessive and inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics, specifically citing the bright lights and colorful gnomes as violations of their established guidelines. As I read through the notice, my surprise morphed into frustration. The proposed fine was exorbitant, a $500 penalty that felt like an overreach of authority for simply wanting to create a cheerful atmosphere in my front yard. The letter claimed I had 7 days to remove the decorations or face further penalties, which only intensified my indignation. The vague references in the bylaws left me feeling bewildered. How could twinkling lights and playful gnomes be considered a threat to community standards? This notification was more than just a reprimand, it felt like an unwarranted attack on my right to express joy. Determined not to back down, I could sense this would be the start of a significant battle. As I sat in my living room, the weight of the HOA's notice pressed heavily on my mind. I am not just any resident of this neighborhood, I am a Supreme Court judge, a role that has instilled in me a profound respect for justice, individual rights, and the nuances of authority. My career has been dedicated to interpreting laws and upholding principles that protect citizens from overreach, and yet here I found myself facing a seemingly petty but deeply significant conflict. My position has shaped my understanding of rules, not merely as arbitrary guidelines but as frameworks meant to enhance community life while respecting personal freedoms. It was astonishing to me how swiftly the HOA seemed to disregard these values in pursuit of conformity. In my line of work, we often dissect legal texts and principles. Now, I would apply those same analytical skills to navigate this situation. This incident was not just about decorations, it represented a larger ideological battle against an institution wielding power without accountability. Fueled by my professional background, I felt an obligation not only to defend my right to decorate but also to challenge the HOA's authority over individuals within our community, a challenge I was ready to embrace head-on. Determined to understand the basis of the HOA's claims, I dove into the association's bylaws and regulations, a thick document that had been provided to all homeowners upon moving in. As I sifted through the pages, I noted several sections that outlined acceptable decorations, yet found them vague and open to interpretation. No specific guidelines existed for holiday displays, which made the enforcement of such regulations seem arbitrary. It became clear that the HOA had a history of selectively applying rules. While my festive lights were singled out, other homes adorned with similar decorations remained untouched. One neighbor's extravagant Halloween display, complete with animatronic figures and a haunted house, had gone unnoticed. This inconsistency struck me as unfair and highlighted potential bias within the board's enforcement practices. Using my training as a judge, I methodically cataloged these discrepancies, preparing to challenge the HOA's authority and demand accountability. I also discovered instances where residents had previously contested fines, only to have their concerns dismissed without justification. Armed with this information, I felt increasingly confident that I could not only defend my right to decorate but also advocate for more transparent and equitable enforcement of HOA regulations moving forward. With my findings in hand, I decided it was time to engage directly with the HOA board. I drafted a polite yet assertive email to the board members, outlining my concerns about the fine and the inconsistencies I had noted in decoration enforcement. I requested a meeting to discuss these issues further, hoping to clear the air and present my case in person. A week later, I received a response inviting me to the next monthly HOA meeting. As I entered the community center that evening, I felt a mix of determination and apprehension. The room was filled with familiar faces, some of whom had expressed support for my festive approach while others quietly disapproved. During the meeting, I presented my argument regarding the vague bylaws and uneven enforcement practices. While some board members listened attentively, others appeared dismissive. One member even attempted to deflect by emphasizing the need for conformity without addressing my specific points. Despite their resistance, I remained resolute, confident that the principles of fairness and transparency would ultimately win out. As discussions continued, it became clear that this confrontation would not only involve defending my decorations but also advocating for meaningful change within our community's governance structure. As I prepared for the next steps in my confrontation with the HOA, I recognized that my background as a Supreme Court judge equipped me with invaluable skills. My years in the judiciary had honed my ability to analyze complex legal documents and discern the nuances of law and equity. This experience was crucial in parsing through the HOA's bylaws, allowing me to identify not just vague language but also potential violations of due process and fairness. My legal training provided me with strategies for negotiation and argumentation, empowering me to articulate my position clearly and persuasively during meetings. I understood how to frame my concerns in a way that highlighted not only my rights but also those of my fellow residents who might be too intimidated to speak up. In discussions with the board, I employed legal terminology deliberately, reinforcing the idea that their enforcement practices should adhere to principles of justice and transparency. Moreover, knowing how to conduct thorough research allowed me to gather evidence effectively, documenting examples of selective enforcement that could support my case. This blend of legal acumen and community advocacy positioned me as a formidable opponent, ready to challenge the HOA's authority while advocating for broader changes beneficial to all residents. Recognizing that the fight against the HOA was not mine alone, I set out to mobilize my neighbors who might also feel stifled by the board's arbitrary enforcement. I began by hosting a casual gathering at my home, inviting those who had expressed dissatisfaction with the HOA's practices in passing conversations. Over warm drinks and holiday treats, we exchanged stories about our experiences and grievances regarding the board's regulations. As discussions unfolded, I highlighted the inconsistencies I had uncovered in the bylaws and how they seemed to impact us all differently. Several neighbors shared their own accounts of receiving warnings for minor infractions while others continued to flaunt rules without repercussion. It became clear that many felt intimidated by the HOA's authority, fearing repercussions if they spoke out. Inspiring a sense of solidarity among us, I encouraged everyone to voice their concerns collectively at the next HOA meeting. Together, we drafted a petition outlining our shared grievances, emphasizing the need for fair treatment and accountability. This collective action transformed our individual frustrations into a united front, empowering us to challenge not just my fine, but the entire culture of intimidation that had taken root within our community. As the collective concerns of the community mounted, it became evident that a more formal approach was necessary. With my legal background, I initiated the first steps towards potential legal action against the HOA, filing a complaint in small claims court regarding the unjust $500 fine. This motion aimed not just at overturning the penalty but also at shedding light on the broader issues of selective enforcement and arbitrary governance within the HOA. Simultaneously, I proposed mediation as a means to resolve our grievances amicably. In preparation for this process, I gathered all relevant evidence, including testimonies from neighbors who had faced similar issues, alongside documentation of inconsistent enforcement practices. The mediation session brought both parties to the table, with my allies standing firm beside me. Underneath the negotiation surface lay palpable tension between the individual rights we sought to assert and the HOA's tight grip on community regulations. Although some board members remained resistant, others showed signs of recognizing the need for re-evaluation of their policies. As discussions progressed, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, not only to protect myself but also to advocate for a fairer framework that respected both community standards and individual expression. The turning point in this escalating conflict came during a pivotal mediation session, where emotions ran high and the stakes were laid bare. As I presented our collective case, a quiet yet powerful moment unfolded when one of my neighbors, a typically reserved retiree, stood up to share her experiences with the HOA. She spoke of the fear and intimidation she felt after receiving warnings for harmless changes in her garden, revealing how the board's tactics stifled personal expression. Her heartfelt testimony resonated with many in the room, shifting the atmosphere from a mere negotiation to a rallying cry for change. This unexpected display of courage inspired others to voice their concerns, transforming our small gathering into an empowering coalition against the HOA's authority. As discussions unfolded, a board member unexpectedly suggested revisiting the bylaws to clarify vague language and ensure fair treatment, a major concession that indicated a willingness to address the underlying issues we had raised. The mood shifted from defensive to collaborative, and I sensed that the tide was turning in our favor. This moment solidified our solidarity and momentum, signaling not just a potential resolution for my own situation but a broader movement towards reforming the HOA's practices for the entire community. The culmination of our efforts came when the HOA board convened to discuss our collective grievances and proposed changes to the bylaws. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as we awaited their decision. After much deliberation, the board announced a compromise. They would rescind my fine and implement a process for residents to submit decoration requests for review, ensuring all expressions of personal style could be considered within a structured framework. This resolution was not just a victory for me but for the entire community, as it fostered an environment where individual expression could coexist with community standards. The board also committed to holding open forums where residents could voice concerns and suggest modifications to existing regulations, signaling a shift towards greater transparency and responsiveness. For me, the experience reinforced the importance of standing up for one's rights while recognizing the value of compromise. I had not only defended my right to decorate my home freely but contributed to a broader movement that empowered others in our neighborhood. As the dust settled, I felt a newfound sense of camaraderie among my neighbors, a collective commitment to ensuring our community remained vibrant and diverse, a place where every voice could be heard. The HOA had learned that authority should complement, not stifle, community spirit. Reflecting on this journey, I realized that authority, when wielded without accountability, can stifle the very values it seeks to protect, community and individuality. My experience with the HOA has illuminated the importance of engaging with those in power, not just as a duty but as a vital component of a thriving neighborhood. The initial confrontation over my decorations became a catalyst for change, revealing how fear and silence can lead to oppression, but also how collective action can empower voices that might otherwise go unheard. This conflict taught me that community values must embrace diversity and self-expression rather than enforce conformity alone. Standing up for one's rights is not merely an act of defiance, it is an affirmation of our shared humanity and the belief that everyone deserves the ability to express themselves freely. Moving forward, I hope our community maintains this momentum, fostering an environment where residents feel encouraged to speak out when faced with injustice. Together, we can nurture a space that celebrates not only compliance with rules but also the vibrancy and creativity each homeowner brings. This experience has reaffirmed my commitment to advocate for both personal rights and the collective good, shaping a future where authority complements community spirit rather than suppresses it.